career. If you are looking to level up in your career, then you are in the right place. Today, our guest is Bernie Frazier. She is a career coach at Impact Group and author of the highly acclaimed book, Your Success is in You, empowering and equipping you to create your best career ever. Bernie also spent almost 25 years leading corporate recruiting organizations, has served as a keynote speaker for Fortune 500 organizations, and has coached clients globally from C-suite executives to individual contributors. So Bernie, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, let's just go ahead and get started by learning a little bit about you and your career. So give us some background on yourself.
Well, you hit on some of the highlights, if you will. I spent almost 25 years recruiting talent to different companies in different industries, and I led the recruiting function for a number of those. And one, I even had an opportunity to build the function. And one team that I led was a global team. So a lot of experience, and you can imagine talking to thousands and thousands of candidates over the years. And crossing over that for many of the years, I started doing career coaching. And so this is my 24th year of actually doing career coaching, and started a business about, oh gosh, I can't believe it's been 10 years now. Do some of that part time, but I do speaking as well. And obviously doing some work with Impact Group from a career coaching standpoint or an outplacement coaching as well. And then, of course, I
Wonderful.
wrote my book.
Exactly. Well, I want to dig into that more because your philosophy aligns so much with our message at Take Control of Your Career.
Yes.
And the book, Your Success is in You, is all about how, you know, we have the control to own our career the same way that you own a business, or as I've said before, how can you take plan for your career the way a CEO plans in her business?
Right.
So tell us more about how you advise people in job search throughout their career to own their own career success.
Yeah, no, when you invited me to this and I thought about, this whole take control of your career, it's like, oh my gosh, this is almost perfect alignment with what I always share. And I always encourage people to start at the beginning. And the beginning, in terms of looking at your future career, I always ask them, what do you want? I said that is the foundation, and it's probably the most important question that they need to answer as it relates to their career future. And that is, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And so
Yeah, and
it's
it's
not
not only in the career side, from a life perspective, and how do you make sure that those are aligned as well?
exactly, and it applies everywhere. Like you said, life, career, business, you name it, any facet of your life, that question applies. But I tell them you have to answer that question, because until you can tell me what it is you want, I really don't know how to help you. Because do you want to stay in your company? If so, then the coaching that's required and the insights that I would share are going to be very different than if you want to start a job search outside of your company. And even if you do, a search to do what? What do you want to look for? So that's really the foundation that I like to start with clients.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about as we were planning for this conversation is, thinking about how certain career paths can influence where you end up. So if you do want to land at that C-suite or CEO, P&L owner kind of role, thinking in advance about the types of roles that you either go after or accept is a really big deal in terms of the line versus staff, which is especially a critical conversation for women and people of color.
Right, absolutely. And unfortunately, in my experience, most people don't have this type of conversation with themselves. And so I tell them, I said, so how do you know a good opportunity from a bad one if you haven't decided where your goalpost is? Because, again, I was in recruiting for years, and I knew how to lure 90% of people in. I give you a bigger title and more money, and most people will take it. And they never stop and ask, but wait a minute, is this opportunity going to help me get closer to my goal or further away? And if it's going to move you further away from your goal, it may be more money, it may be a bigger title, but is it really a good opportunity? And I think a lot of times, it applies to everyone, but certainly with women, if you have a desire to be as part of the line organization and not staff, you really
Meaning
have
where you're closer to the
to
business, you're driving
exactly
the
the
top
revenue, the
line.
P&L,
Yeah,
exactly, as opposed to like some of the support organizations. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want, but the goal is get clear on what you want. And if you decide that you really want to be on more of the revenue generating sides of the business, then you've got to really be careful in how you select opportunities and understand what is required to get you there so that you can start to close the gaps that you may have that are keeping you from that right now.
absolutely. Great point. And so important uh, that you identified how you as a recruiter, when you're getting pressure from the business saying, I need to fill this role. And obviously, the levers that you have or that the business has are title and
Money.
money,
Hmm.
then it's easy to lure people in. And I think especially coming out of this time with COVID, there's a lot of people that are taking this opportunity to reflect and recognize, you know what, I maybe have been in the passenger seat of my career, letting some of these other things happen to me previously. How can I take this time right now to be very intentional about this next step?
Yeah, I agree. I've had clients and participants who they're doing exactly what you said. COVID was a wake up call for them. And they're going, I've been frustrated, or as I always say, I've been bored, burned out, or frustrated for a number of years and just kind of coasting. And this was really, like you said, the wake up call. And
Mhm.
now I'm at a point that I think I want this next chapter to really count for me. And I go, great. What do you want? So
Yep.
again, it goes back to them answering that question. But a lot of people are doing more self reflection now because they don't want to continue in the crazy grind that maybe they've been on and the grind to nowhere. Meaning, at the end of this, they still won't be in a place that is going to bring them the satisfaction that they want. So they're trying to figure that out now of what do I like? Because some people haven't asked themselves that question in years. They don't even know
Exactly.
what they want. And so now they've got to start this process of figuring it out.
Yeah, great. Well, let's switch gears. And you, as we discussed, have a lot of experience on the internal recruiting side. So, as someone with this level of experience, give us the inside perspective of how to work with internal recruiters as a job seeker.
Oh, absolutely. So, one of the things that a point that I make when I do certain speaking engagements, depending on the topic, but I have this concept and it's called act like a candidate, think like a recruiter. And what I mean by that is too many times candidates, they approach a job search and they are approaching it as if they are the one they're targeting. Well, this makes sense to me. Well, this sounds good to me. And I'm going, but it's not you you're targeting. You have to think like the person that you're targeting. And so, for instance, a lot of people will ask questions like, well, I applied for a position and I never heard back. And I don't understand why recruiters don't follow up and why I can't get them on the phone. And I have to let them know that one, recruiting is often in the human resources department, which is part of the staff function or the support function. So they aren't revenue generating in most companies. So when everyone else is slammed for work, so are recruiters. And when they need more help, they don't always get it just because they need it because they aren't generating revenue. So you could have a recruiter whose workload is up to here and they can't follow up. They don't have the time. They really have to focus on the people who are in front of them, those that are going to be closest to helping them get jobs filled. So, one, I say, be sensitive to the fact that recruiters are also slammed when it comes to work, because I can remember times when I was in recruiting and literally a candidate would call and they'd have an attitude with me. And I'm going, if you think this is helping you get closer to the job, you're wrong. And so having a little bit of compassion and understanding for the recruiter's challenge is certainly one that will help. But, getting connected to the recruiter, one of the ways that I think candidates can set themselves apart is whether the opportunity is a good fit or not. create a relationship with that recruiter. Recruiters often know other recruiters. They're recruiting for other positions. So find out how you can help that recruiter. So in a conversation, you may say something like, I don't feel like this is a good fit, or I understand what you're saying when you say you don't believe this would be an ideal opportunity for me, but I'd love for us to stay in touch. And I'm sure you're probably recruiting for a number of other positions. Let me know what some of those positions are, because I may know people I can refer to you. Now a recruiter will love you, because that's what they're trying to do, is fill jobs, and they're trying to get to good talent. And if you can get them connected to good talent, it endears them to you, and it makes them want to help you out as well. So that's just a little tip that a lot of people don't think about, but it certainly may help them start to build relationships and be able to work through a recruiter to get to other opportunities.
Such a good point. And one actually that another guest, Samantha Foster, said in a slightly different way. So she is an external recruiter and, has people saying the same things. Why aren't people getting back to me, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, for those of us who work on the career side, we understand, and it's one of the things that we always have to help people understand, the very basics of recruiting, which is recruiters are looking to fill a job. They're not necessarily working for you. They're working for the company and the goals of the organization, so that they don't necessarily have a need to make you feel all warm and fuzzy. But her advice when she was on the show recently was that if you don't respond when I come to you asking if if you're interested in a role, if you're not interested and you don't even respond or don't take the time to maybe point me in another direction, I have no use for you really in general. And on the other hand, if you can point me in the direction, like you said, of someone who's going to be great talent for me to talk to about some of the positions that I need right now, I'll remember that and I'll actually respond to you when you need me.
Absolutely. And that is so true. Savvy candidates will understand that, because it can be hard enough to get to a recruiter. If one reaches out, even if you aren't interested, that's probably not the only job they're recruiting for. And so, absolutely, I used to do that all the time, especially when I was in corporate working. Even when I wasn't looking, when a recruiter would reach out to me, I'd always respond, and I would try to set up an actual live conversation with them, because I'm trying to make that connection. Because while I might need you, I might not need you today, I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 months or 6 months. And so, yeah, that recruiter was absolutely right. You want to make that live connection ideally and say, hey, tell me about other jobs you have. Maybe I know some people, and why don't we stay in touch? And just from time to time, shoot me a message and let me know what you're working on, because I may know some people. That's how you start to build up a powerful network of recruiters, so that if you ever need them, you've made a number of deposits. So now you can make withdrawals.
Perfect way to describe it. And you gave us a little bit of insight in your philosophy of what was it? Think like a candidate.
Yeah, act like a candidate, think like a recruiter.
Sorry, I had it backwards. So act like I'm sorry, say it again.
No, that's fine. Act like a candidate, think like a recruiter. Right.
So that, I presume, also carries into the interview process. So tell us some tips that you give candidates and people that you're working with in the job search process for interviewing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that I tell them, and this certainly falls under the act like a candidate, think like a recruiter, is you want to practice before for a number of reasons, but one of them is you want to provide a good quality answer, but do it in a succinct manner. Because I think people lose sight of the fact that you only have so much time to interview, whether that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And during that time, the person interviewing you, they have to ascertain so much information. So they've got questions that a lot of times, not all, but many will have a list of questions that they need to get through to get information. And hopefully they are allocating time at least at the end so that you can ask questions as well. Well, if you draw your answers out to the point where the credits are rolling, that's going to eat into your time at the end. So you want to think about, how do I provide a comprehensive but efficient answer? And I know that sounds tough. And the one that I always use is, with those behavioral based questions of, tell me about a time, describe a situation, give me an example of when you've done something in the past. There are a number of different methods out there. The one that Impact Group uses is called PAR, and it's give the problem, the action, and the result. So take, 20 seconds to kind of set up the problem or the circumstance or the situation and put it so that you're putting it in context for your interviewer. Then you want to talk about what behaviors or what actions you took. And 30, 60 seconds to do that again, because you want them to understand. And then the thing that most people forget is to talk about the results. And that was, did you win? That's like a movie and there's no ending. And I'm sitting here going, did the good guy die or survive? And so you want to be able to share that as well. And I think that's so important. That's certainly one.
I
Another
love that. Thank you for
yeah.
bringing that example up. And when people say, tell me about a time when, or, any of those behavioral type questions, they are looking for an example. So if you do not actually come up with the example, but you start going one direction and then you meander over into, well, I'm a great communicator, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? You're not answering the question, number one. And number two, they're not even going to remember it, because pretty much every question, even if it's not behavioral in style, should be answered with a story, because people remember stories.
Exactly.
And that is going to make you stand out in the interview process also.
Exactly. And to build on what you just said, when you get those questions about, give me an example of, describe a situation, where they're looking for past behavior, past performance, not what you would do. And a lot of times people go, well, I would. So I'm like, I didn't ask what you would do. I want an example of something you've already done. And so that's a point that I often will share, is pay attention to the question that is asked, because people, they hear what they, I think, want to hear, and they answer that. And I'm going, that was not my question. And the example that I always use is, I may say something like, give me an example of an initiative or a problem that you identified and you initiated a solution. And they will start to tell me about something that we did. And we did this, and we did that, and then we did this. And I'm going, but my question was not a we question. I wanted to know, what did you do? Because I'm not interviewing we, and I'm not looking to hire we. I'm looking to hire you potentially. And so even if your example is a great one to fit the question, but it is more team-based, one, acknowledge that up front. This is the example that I want to share. It really was a team effort, but let me share the role that I played on the team and the impact I was able to have. But you can't take an I question and turn it into a we response, because that doesn't answer the question.
Perfect example that applies to interviewing, but then also to just, how do you progress in your career in general, and be willing to own the parts of certain projects that you contributed to, and don't make it all about we. I mean, I know we all want to be collaborators, especially women. And sometimes for some women, there is a little bit of a challenge to toot your own horn, if you will. But how important is it is, if you want to progress to that next level, to find those ways to highlight what you personally did.
Exactly. And like you said, I think women, we tend to be more, oh no, that's okay. It was everyone. Well, everyone may have contributed, but I'm not hiring everyone. I'm trying to hire one person. And if you don't share what you did, the other candidates will. And I think people sometimes forget that they're in a competition. And it's not about being overly, braggadocious and, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not about that, but it is about communicating and sharing your strengths, your abilities, and how you are able to have an impact on the business or the work that you would be required to do. And, a couple of other things I share with people, especially in this whole virtual space, is look into the camera, not the screen. And I tell them, use the 80-20 rule and try to mimic what you would do in real life. You wouldn't sit there and just stare at a person because you'd look like a psycho, but you also wouldn't be like this the whole time either if you were in person. And I said, so, take 80% of your glance and look in the camera, and then you'll look away and come back. And you may look over there and you come back, and make it as natural as possible. But, an interview basic forever has been make good eye contact. And by looking into that camera, I tell them you give the illusion that you're making good eye contact with the person. And I said, and it takes practice because it's awkward at first, but you've got to do that. And then the other is smile. I'm like, my gosh, some people are so intense in an interview and they're like this the whole time. And I'm going, no company wants to hire someone who comes across as flatline, the curmudgeon, or they're angry. And I said, you'd be amazed at how something as simple as a smile at appropriate times, it softens you up, it makes you more open, it makes you more engaging, and it makes them want to interact with you. So it's just simple things like that can help too.
Great advice for the virtual interview, which we're seeing a lot of these days, and absolutely will continue to as well.
Yes.
Another area of the job search process that a lot of people, especially women, are maybe mystified by is the negotiation process.
Yes.
So what are some of your favorite tips for people in that situation?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think women and people of color a lot of times make less. And I've said this for years, it's not always discrimination. It's not. White men are more likely to ask. And a lot of times that's really the difference. And so what I try to encourage people, the first thing I tell them is take inventory of your tangible assets. And I say, this is things not that you like people and that you're a hard worker and that you're a team player. I said, to be quite honest, I said, those are, everyone says it, it's a cliche, and it sounds kind of Miss America-ish in an interview. I said, but you really want to think about, number one, they offered you the job for a reason. Why? What experiences have you had? What education have you attained? What credentials are you bringing, and accomplishments have you achieved that got you to the point of even getting the offer, or that could get you an offer? And I tell people, write them down, because you need to see all that you've done. A lot of times people forget about things that they've done and that they've accomplished. And two, a lot of people don't negotiate because they're scared. And I said, but if you can start to look at everything you've done, it's a little bit of a confidence boost, and it can help you start to appreciate your own value and worth. So look at those things that you're bringing to the table and realize there's real value for this, and you need to make sure that you get compensated adequately for it. So that's one of the first ones. Certainly doing your research within that market. What are some of the going rates? And, the thing that people need to understand is most medium to larger companies, they pay for compensation studies. So the data they have will never be the same as what the person will be able to find online, but it gives them some sort of knowledge. So take advantage of sites like salary.com, payscale.com, Glassdoor, to get a feel for, okay, for this type of role at this level, what is the compensation looking like? And I always say, try all three of them to see where there's consistency or inconsistencies, for sure.
Yeah, great advice there.
Yeah, it's important because I said companies are armed with information. You need to be armed with information too. And probably the best way is to network. And if they have someone that works in that company that has access either to good information or someone who does, that can find out what the range is for the position, that's gold right there. So, those are certainly a couple of really important things to do. Practice, because it can be awkward, and people go, well, how do I start a negotiation? And I always tell them the first thing to do when you actually get into the negotiation is reinforce your interest in the position and or the company or just the opportunity. And I equate it to dating. And I said, if you were in a relationship, fairly new relationship, and your significant other says, I love you, and you say nothing back. said, how do you think that person will feel? They've got egg on their face, they're a little nervous, and they're going, I'm not quite sure how I should move forward from here. And I said, it's the same thing when you're doing a negotiation. I said, a company is much more incented to try to work with you to get to the number you want when they know that they are the one you want. So you can start by saying something like, I'm so excited to get this offer. As you know, I have been interviewing with other companies, but this is my first choice. Because as a recruiter, I then go, okay, good. All right, we're halfway home. Let's see what we've got to do to close this deal. And I have much more incentive to do it, or to get the hiring manager to bend a little bit where they can to try to meet what you're looking for, because we know that if we can do that, then you're going to say yes.
Great advice. And one of the things that I highly recommend that you said is practice. So if you are uncomfortable making the ask, then practice in front of a mirror where it's where nobody needs to see it, and then graduate to the next level with practicing with a friend or a significant other, because you need to get to the point where you're not uncomfortable and stammering when you're positioning all the reasons why they should make a larger offer. Because if you don't believe it, then they won't either.
Exactly. And like you said, that practice can help you start to get comfortable with how you want to phrase certain things. Like you said, because you want to come across as convincing that you really believe that you are worth more. And if you come across as, well, I guess if it's kind of on a good day, and, maybe if it's not raining today and you felt really, a certain way in your heart, you might want to consider giving me a little bit more. That's not going to be very convincing. And so you want to practice so that it doesn't come across as arrogant, but it does come across as confident.
Especially when you're saying all the value that you bring as well. Now,
Right.
one of the things that I know some people, especially maybe a little earlier in their career, although I mean, it could come in at any point, is people might say, well, what if I try to negotiate and then they rescind the offer? What's your answer to that?
I've had people ask me about that, and I tell them, one, the chances of them rescinding it are exceptionally slim. And if for no other reason, because most no, I won't even say most, I have never encountered a recruiter that has a candidate tree out back where they just go, oh, you need a this? Sure, let me go to my candidate tree and just pick a few people off. No, it takes time and effort and money to find the right talent. So when you get a candidate to that finish line and this is the person you want, I would be exceptionally shocked for a company that would go, oh, well, how dare you try to get more money? We're just going to rescind the offer. Most companies will not do that. And by most, I don't mean 51%. I mean 99%. But here's another way to look at it. If a company would rescind an offer simply because they were offended maybe that you would even think to ask for more, I would challenge you to ask yourself, is this really a company you want to work for? Because think about it. Will they handle other issues like that as it relates to resources needed? If you're in the job or you're leading staff and you all are exceptionally tight on resources and everyone is drowning and you really need more, are they going to terminate you when you ask for more in your budget? So I think people need to really look at it like that. And again, it goes back to valuing themselves and go, if they would rescind an offer, that was probably a favor done for you, because that could be a precursor to other things that you may experience if you were to work for that company.
Not to mention the fact that if we're talking about a salesperson, a procurement person, any number of
Right.
other roles, if you don't
Negotiate.
negotiate, then that might be raising some red flags about the quality of the hire potentially.
Exactly. And anytime I was extending offers to people, say at the manager level for sure and higher, or if this were a position where it was a hard to fill assignment because there was a skill shortage, I expected you to negotiate. So when I would have conversation with the hiring manager, many times we would go, okay, so here's what we're going to offer. Now, if they counter, then we could probably offer this much more and we could add this much more. So we were almost baking it in because we expect you to negotiate.
Great point. So love that advice. Thank you for making it so tangible in terms of how to work with recruiters, how to act like a candidate, think like a recruiter,
Yes.
and some tips on the negotiation side. So Bernie, thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, we want to promote your book as well.
Oh,
So
thank you.
that is called Your Success is in You. And you can
Yes.
find that on Amazon. Thank you so much for joining us and giving these great tips.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and good luck to